Hello, welcome, and thanks for joining me. Today I want to do a quick chat about the most recent book that I finished. It is called Who Fears Death by Nnedi Okorafor. This is another one of those electronic editions where, we have nice cover art for the thumbnail, but then when you actually open the work, you get, a title page for the cover. So, what can I say? Recurring theme. So Who Fears Death by Nnedi Okorafor. So I actually read the prequel to this work last year. The prequel is called The Book of Phoenix and it's by Nnedi Okorafor, and I did a video chat on that. I will put a link to it down below in case anyone's interested in learning a bit more about the prequel. This particular work was it's copyrighted in 2010. It won the World Fantasy Award in 2011. I saw online, so that's nice. And it is a fantasy. It's a post-apocalyptic fantasy, I think, is how it's actually classified. You don't really get when I read it. It feels more like fantasy to me. There's a lot of magic in it, and not a lot of science. We don't really understand what the apocalypse was. We do understand that we're sometime in the future and that something has happened. We do come across, the characters in the book do come across some old tech and things like that. It's not your usual post-apocalypse in something like, Mad Max or something like that. It's a different kind of post-apocalypse. It's set actually in an area of Africa called in the future. This is called the Seven Rivers Kingdom, the Kingdom of Seven Rivers. And so it's basically during this time, in this area, there are a group called the Nuru, and then there are a group called the Okeki, and the Nuru are the dominant group, and they're actually, they're very oppressive towards the Okeki. They're actually involved in a sort of a genocide of them, and our story is set in this time. Ultimately, our main character, whose name is Onye, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that's how I pronounced it as I was reading the book. But Onye is what is called Iwu. She is the child of a rape there is weaponized rape in this conflict, and her mother has been is an Okeki woman, and she is raped by a Nuru soldier guy. The Iwu people, because of the different colors of the skins of the Nurus and the Okekis, their offspring are very distinctive, and so they're outcasts among the among people. They're considered bad luck. So her mother and she, as a small child, spend a lot of time in the desert, but then they ultimately go to a town where she has her childhood, and then ultimately goes to school. We do realize that she's got magical abilities. Being a girl and being Iwu, though, is not an easy thing in this time for her, and so she struggles a lot with this. Ultimately, she does begin to develop her powers. She and some of her high school classmates that she becomes fast friends with for a particular reason that I'll go into in a moment, and a couple of other people, I don't want to give a lot away, go on a quest, and then the rest of the book is first half of this book is sort of this education coming of age thing, and then the second half of the book is this quest that they go on, ultimately to try and stop the genocide of the Okeki people by the Nuru, although the Okeki people, we learn in the process, are not completely guilt-free either. They use child soldiers and things like this. It's not a cut and dry morality that we're dealing with, but it is true that the Okeki are on the verge of being wiped out completely by the Nuru. Yeah, so it's set, like I said, it's set in Africa. Specifically, we find out in the acknowledgments at the end of the book, probably the area is the current Sudan. So that area sort of corresponds to the Kingdom of the Seven Rivers. There is a lot of African folklore in this and African magical beings, which I just loved. That's not something that I've come across before in fantasy or science fiction. There's one particular folkloric being called a masquerade that she interacts with a couple of times. I looked up a masquerade, online. This is an example of an African masquerade. There's apparently quite a lot of different versions that this takes in depending on the specific culture in Africa. But this one I thought was kind of cool, and the one that she interacts with does have this this sort of grassy, outer coat. So there's other beings like this too, though, from African folklore that were interesting to learn about. I won't go into all of them here. She does, though she develops her magical skills, and her main skill is she can shapeshift, which is a lot of fun. So that's a lot of fun. I mentioned that the book does deal with some difficult subjects, but that's this time when she's a teenager that I mentioned, or in the first half of the book, when she's sort of coming of age and dealing with this being a girl and being sort of an outcast for being an Iwu, and then she's really stubborn and she's really just determined to get an education in magic and sorcery, and so she really has to just be really perseverant in order to try to get that accomplished. That and then whenever they do set out on their journey with her three friends from school, from childhood, and then a couple of other people, it really reminded me of anime. So that section of the book, I really saw that section of book as African anime. I don't know if there's such a thing as African anime, but if there's not, there really should be, because that section, particularly of the book, when she's in high school and when they're just about to leave to go on this quest, had a real anime vibe to me, in a good way. The other thing is this, like I said, there are difficult things, though, that definitely don't feel like anime, like genital mutilation, child soldiers. There's weaponized rape. There's this it's a very, very male-dominated society with women almost as property, not almost. So this is sort of the situation she finds herself in, the culture she finds herself in, the society that she finds herself in at this time. But another real interesting thing that I was thinking when I was reading this book was this concept of Carnism. And Carnism, if you're not aware what Carnism is the belief system surrounding meat eating, where it's the psychology of, for example, not eating a dog, like people that have dogs typically don't eat their pets, or cats, or birds, like pigeons or whatever, bluebirds. But then they don't have a problem eating ducks and pigs and cows and goats. And so, this character, in this story, she can speak to camels. So she can speak to several. Since she's a shapeshifter, she can actually turn into other animals, and she can experience the world through their being. She knows they have spirits. She actually brings, at one point, she interacts with the spirit of a goat that's been killed. And and it's terrified and, shocked and everything at having been killed. And so she has this affinity for animals, but then she seems to always be chomping on some chicken or goat or meat. And at one point, she can speak to camels, like I said. They meet some camels on their quest. These camels are wild camels that come up and join them. She refuses to ride camels because she refuses to exploit them. So she considers them persons. She calls them people. But yet, she has this disconnect with other species that she considers food. And at one point, she's even interacting with this. There's a village that lives inside of a moving dust storm. Yeah, fun. But these people that live inside this moving dust storm, they live in a lot of juju. They live with magic's part of their everyday lives. And when they first meet them, one of the people in that village actually asked her, "Do you eat meat?" And she was like, "Well, yeah." So that Carnism, that was to me, it's a perfect illustration of Carnism. And if anybody's interested in Carnism, by the way, I know a really good video on YouTube. I'll put a link to it down in the comments below for that too as well. So anyway, I think I will leave it at that. I had sworn last year after I read the Book of Phoenix, I thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and read Who Fears Death. Post-apocalyptic things are not usually my thing, but this one's not your typical dystopia. Well, it is a dystopia, but it's not your typical sort of fight for resources, Mad Max type of post-apocalypse. It's set in a big city and stuff like that. It's completely, to me, it was completely sort of fresh and different, mainly due to this African influence. And I didn't mention either that Nnedi Okorafor has a tie to. She lives in the U.S., but she has a tie to Nigeria. Her parents were Nigerian, and she has spent a lot of time in Nigeria. And I believe she got the idea. I believe she said. In something she wrote, that she got this idea. The idea originated when her father passed away, and she was in Nigeria, and the idea for the book came to her then. And then she also in the credits, she gives credit to an Associated Press writer for an article that came out in 2004 about weaponized rape, and that I think also contributed to the inspiration for this story. So not all of it was real easy to read because of this, but it was really a compelling story and told really well, and I enjoyed it. So I'm going to leave it at that. Until next time, take care.